All right, guys, what's going on? We are here at DexaFit in Minneapolis, Minnesota, my hometown now. It's not my home state, but I'm a little salty about that from Wisconsin. Here at brand DexaFit, this is like revolutionary shit, everybody. Like, this is revolutionary stuff compared to what we're used to. Most of us will go to our local gym with a personal trainer. We might do skin fold measurements for body fat, or there's this thing called InBody, which is completely inaccurate.
Yeah.
So tell us why DexaScan is the way to go for an accurate measurement of just body fat alone. We'll talk about that to start.
Yeah, so when it comes to DEXA, it's utilizing a low dose of X-ray to penetrate all the way through the tissue, throughout the body, right? So it basically works like a copier. It goes and passes one by one in a couple inches each time, and then it's just picking up what's on the other side, breaking into three buckets: bone, lean, and fat.
Sure.
Right? So it's referred to as a three-compartment model because it's breaking into those three tissue types.
Yeah.
Most other methods that you described are a two-compartment model, so it's breaking into fat mass and fat-free mass. So we get a little bit more granularity, but we get much more region specificity, right? So not only are we just kind of getting obviously a total body image, but we can see what is it down the arms, what is it down the legs, the torso, right? Which allows us to have a lot more precision and accuracy test to test. Things like bioimpedance are very reliant on what's called basically curve fitting, right? So they take in demographic data and they say, well, we built our models based on other methods, and we're trying to fit it to those based on the demographic data, based on the signal that we're receiving.
Sure.
Whereas with this is a much more direct measurement.
Right.
So when it comes to medical studies with body composition, DEXA is going to be typically the gold standard.
Right. So the other variations of body fat measurements, we mentioned body calipers, body fat calipers, the InBody experience. There's like the water dunk tank, I believe, is one, and there's also this AirPod thing.
Yeah, the bod pod and hydrostatic weighing. Yep.
Is this sort of the premier way to do it, or at least the economical way in which you're going to get the most accurate measurement of your body fat?
Yeah, each method has its pros and cons. If you want the highest accuracy with the best granularity and the most reproducibility, DEXA is the way to go.
Sure.
Other methods, they can have their place, but if you want to have that consistency and reliability of the data, nothing really replaces DEXA.
Right.
And our position has been to help bring down that cost and the accessibility, which has been a big driving force behind historically why it wasn't as well adopted.
Sure, right.
And it's certainly a lot more convenient than getting wet and going into a dunk tank.
Right, and not to mention a lot of that stuff too you can't do unless you go to a university at some point that I've come across. I mean, there's not like a retail store where you can go into a dunk tank that I know of anyway. And the nice thing about DexaFit locations, it's not just Minneapolis. I mean, they are everywhere at this point. How many locations are out there right now?
About 25 open in the U.S. We're expanding to Asia within Hong Kong and Singapore within the next few months here. So our technology is really positioning us to expand much more rapidly going into late 2019 and early 2020. But we're all down California. In the West Coast. We don't have as much presence on the East Coast, but that's a big initiative going into the end of this year. Plenty in Illinois and throughout the Midwest as well, and then in Florida and Texas too. Yeah. So spread out with most city centers, but definitely mostly within the Midwest and the West Coast, but we're certainly expanding into the East Coast.
What's cool too is, I mean, obviously we talk a lot about fitness and nutrition, so body fat's the first thing that comes to mind, but this machine can do more than just body fat. Like, I didn't realize the accuracy of bone density. I'm 32 years old, and we were talking, most people don't go get their bone density tested until they're 60.
Yeah.
At this point, I can see if I'm an early candidate for osteoporosis or something along those lines. How many people actually come to you for that versus the body fat? Or is body fat primarily still the driver of the business?
It's really the all-encompassing composition, right? Because there's certainly people that come in, they just want to know the body fat percentage, and everything else is kind of just noise to them. But we really are trying to get people to position towards our narrative of this full view of your body composition, right? Because all of these components are very important when it comes to long-term preventative health care, right?
For sure.
Now, for bone density, DEXA is what was developed initially for that, right? So in the late 80s, really going into the early 90s, when it was used for site-specific at the dual hip or lumbar spine, and that's still largely its biggest use case today.
Right.
But with increases in technology and the improvements with software, we definitely see DexaFit as a driving force behind improving the usefulness of total body bone density scanning in the future as well. So generally, total body DEXA scans tend to overestimate when it comes to specific bone density levels.
Sure.
But if you're anywhere close on a total body level, you're going to be even closer on a site specific.
And another cool metric, and this is my report, 10.4, damn right. Visceral fat. So this is something that your body fat calipers aren't measuring.
Nope.
And visceral fat's going to be the fat around your major organs.
Exactly.
Right? So this machine can pick that up, and that also can be a cause for concern if it's too high.
Certainly, yeah. So when we have high levels and high concentrations of fat around the abdominal organs, it can impact your hormonal balance and just really kind of wreak havoc.
Right.
So generally what we see, if you think of like middle-aged men with a big kind of pot belly, right? That's when we're seeing large amounts of visceral fat. You know, in terms of nominal pounds, you know, we've got you at about a pound. You know, we can see that go up to 6, 7, sometimes even 10 plus pounds of pure visceral fat, right? So that's really what's driving a lot of the large risks and symptoms associated with poor body composition. You know, if someone has a, you know, relatively higher body fat percentage, but, you know, lower than expected visceral fat, their associated risk is probably a little bit lower when it comes to more of those kind of hormonal issues. You know, they might still experience, you know, joint discomfort and kind of just signs of carrying the load, but in terms of the raw impact from what we would expect from visceral fat, they might not get those symptoms, right? So it's very, and you can have lower body fat percentage, you know, sometimes, you know, 16, 18, 20%, and still have, you know, sometimes 2+ pounds of visceral fat. So not only do we look at that nominal pounds, we also look at what's that percentage of visceral fat relative to the total fat around the belly, right? So if you've only got maybe, you know, let's just say 2 pounds of visceral fat, but it makes up 75% of the fat around that belly, well, that's a higher percentage, right? So the research is still obviously being conducted, and in terms of where that manifest of symptoms starts to occur. But we see ourselves as, again, being a driving force behind when does this start to crop up, because we've got, you know, tens of thousands of DEXA scans across all of our locations so far. Yeah,
it's very cool too on here. Obviously, you have your lean mass for your right region and your left region. So if you're a personal trainer, you're getting ready for a competition and stuff too, you can see where your inconsistencies are between your body halves as well. Obviously, visual, most of you people can see it, but sometimes you can't, and it gives you an opportunity to do that. These aren't actually expensive at all. Like, they're actually very, very affordable, and I know you guys have different plans for just the DEXA scan alone, but before we talk about price, like, how much does that machine cost?
It depends on the model and the deal that you kind of get. You know, DexaFit, we have our own pricing because we buy so many of them. You know, they can go anywhere between, you know, 50, 60,000 to some models up to 100,000 plus.
So I say that because when you hear how much this costs, like in the scheme of things, it's literally nothing. It's pennies. So, I mean, it varies from location to location, I believe, as well, right? The price of model, or is it?
For the most part, all of our locations offer the exact same pricing, our kind of standard pricing options that are listed on our DexaFit website. Though some locations might have some specific deal that might not be national.
Do you guys have sort of the monthly package where they could purchase like an annual package where they come in once a month?
Yeah, so how it's set up is we've got prepay options where you save 10%, and then monthly options where it's just a payment plan spreading it out over 12 months, right? Generally, it doesn't make too much sense to scan on a month-by-month basis, depending on kind of what progress you're seeing, just because there's a lot of noise and you just haven't given your body enough time to really make any meaningful changes. Now, if you do something drastic, you could see drastic change, but most people don't do that, right? So generally that sweet spot is right around the 8-week mark where you can see really meaningful change. You've given yourself enough time to actually see some progress, and then locking that in and kind of getting that forward progress and momentum going, right?
So cool.
So that 8 to 12 week range is really that sweet spot. And then our typical plan is our starter plan, which includes 4 test credits. So if someone wanted to do, say, a quarterly DEXA scan, that fits in really well.
I think that's great too, because most people, if you're doing bodybuilding competitions, for instance, for people watching this, like, you get your before, your after, and if you do a second comp maybe later in the year, 4 quarters should cover you for that. Let's shift focus from that to the last thing we did, which is a 3D body scanner, which is something that you don't see every single day. And we were talking before we came on camera about how the DEXA scanner is more internal focused, and this 3D body scanner is more external focused. What type of metrics can we take from the 3D scan and apply to what we're doing?
Yeah, so certainly there's the visual component where, you know, that's just a 2D visual, right? And then this is a 3D model that, like we were talking about earlier, you could get that 3D printed. You can bring it up on the app on your phone, right? But you can see yourself from 360 degrees and kind of get in and get as granular as you'd like. So there's obviously the components of looking at the circumference around your waist, you know, biceps, all the different portions of your body to see how many inches am I gaining or losing, and am I doing it in the areas that I want to? And if you're not seeing the change that you want, again, just like with the DEXA, what do you need to adjust to get back on track, right? But the big point is that, you know, a lot of people track their progress with progress pictures, right? Which is, again, it's still kind of a 2D, very flat image, and they can be sometimes very easy to trick when it comes to lighting, right?
For sure.
So the 3D scan, that's you in 3D space, right? So you can't hide anything from it with the angles or the lighting or anything. You're in the same position every time, so it's very consistent, which is important, right? All this comes down to consistency and reproducibility, which gives you the most long-term effectiveness with tracking that progress through time.
Yeah, I mean, good thing you mentioned lighting, because that's a big component. Tan can change the way you look, especially during the summer months. I'm a big proponent of this. Obviously, we do a transformation challenge at Fitness Informant for people to do one before and after, if you're actually going to take it seriously, because it's really beneficial to see the results. I mean, you guys have done enough scans in here. How many times have like people come back for their secondary scan, made improvements, and they just light up and they glow?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's unbelievable, right? And when you can get that very objective nature of this is exactly how I progressed over this time frame in response to whatever program I was following, it's very satisfying.
Sure.
But the same is also true if you didn't see the progress that you wanted. You know, some people kind of react negatively, but you should really take that as a positive opportunity, because you have proof that that didn't work, so you better change something. And instead of wasting a year doing something that didn't work, you wasted maybe 8 weeks.
Yep.
Right?
And even prior to that, like we were talking about how people sort of underestimate their body fat percentage. They come in here and it's sort of a slap to the face of reality for people. It's good, because as a society, we always say we eat healthy, we don't smoke, we don't drink, our body fat's, it's not true. Like we don't eat right, our body fat's higher than what we think. So it's nice to get that reality check so you can actually make changes in your life. You mentioned something earlier too about how this gets instantly sent to your cell phone. There's apps that come out now. There's one on the iOS. There's for Android, which you're explaining to me earlier. Really cool. I want you to explain to these guys what that's going to encompass and what type of benefits a customer can get from that.
Yeah. So our current version is on iOS right now. Our Android version launches next week, which would be July, probably 8th, 9th.
Yeah, so it'll be out by the time you guys see this for sure.
Yep. So the initial focus was presenting all of the data points that we collect right within the mobile app, and then the secondary point as we get further along in our roadmap is showing challenges and leaderboards, how you compare against your peer group, and what optimal might look like for people very similar to you, what that journey looks like over time. So if you come in on day one, and let's just say you're someone that's at 25% body fat, your goal is to eventually compete within a bodybuilding competition. We know what bodybuilders look like on these scans because we have hundreds of them, if not thousands of them, across all of our locations. So we know what that journey looks like from point A to point B and what that timeline typically looks like. And then to further expand upon that, when we get later into this year, going into next year, a marketplace of products and services and local facilities that best match the right solution with the right person. So if you come in again on day one and you say I want to get to again be a bodybuilder, or maybe it's just general health, what is the right person or the right product or the right facility to get you to that point? And that might change throughout the spectrum, but the key is that as you go through that progress, we actually know how you're responding and when we need to make any adjustments or changes.
That's so cool. I mean, it's awesome. The amount of data that these guys have on the structure is amazing. It'd be cool, like if they get a Jay Cutler of some sort, like save that one and say that's the guy I want to be. Last question I'll ask you is, a lot of people always ask, like, will my insurance cover this? The answer is no, but the HSA, right?
The answer is it depends.
It depends, okay.
Right? So we don't accept formal insurance billing. That's a very mundane and bureaucratic process. And we've positioned the price point low enough that it's very accessible for most people, right? For HSA and FSA, most providers will allow the charge. Some can be a little bit sticky because they just aren't familiar with this sort of testing, and it's very unusual to them, although we hope to be a force of change to help get those providers on board. I mean, it's a no-brainer considering the junk that you can buy with it.
Yeah,
right?
I know.
So it's always prudent to check with your provider first, just to get them to sign off. But yeah, for the most part, HSA and FSA will largely cover it without much hassle.
Super awesome.
But again, for the most part, we try to position it where it's very affordable for anyone, regardless if you have that or not.
So the website is?
DexaFit.com.
And you can check, there's 25 locations now. They're going to be expanding more and more. Here's my sort of takeaway and recommendation for everybody watching this, like get one done. If there's one within driving distance, and what driving distance, if it's less than an hour or even an hour and a half, like it's totally worth it to get this. The nice part is you're going to get a real picture of who you are as a person. And if you're doing our transformation challenge, get one before and after. Even if you're not, just get one for general health. I mean, we always talk, I encourage people to always go get blood work done, you know, for their hormonal levels. This is stuff that you can't get at home in your on your couch or at your local gym. If you are a personal trainer and there's one of these around there, work with the DexaFit locations if you're a personal trainer. They'll work with you so that way you can get your clients to come here and get scanned, because it's only going to help you become a better teacher to those involved as well. So
yeah, and if your process isn't working for someone, a good trainer should take that as a learning opportunity to say, how can I get better as a trainer? How can I help improve and make a better experience for my clients?
Right.
And we're certainly working on tools to help facilitate that from a technology perspective, whether it's an iPad app or an iPhone app or whatever for trainers. But I just want to make one point. You brought up testing blood work, which is obviously a great thing to do, and it's something that a lot of like corporate wellness, and it's a very traditional way to look at preventative health. But if we look at that, poor blood work is largely a response to poor body composition and poor cardiorespiratory fitness for decades, right? So if you have poor cardiorespiratory fitness, which we would measure with the VO2 max test, or poor body composition, especially with that high visceral fat, well, even if you have perfect blood work today, that's probably not going to be the case in maybe 10 years or 20 years. So this is, again, that preventative health roadmap of where are you today and what can you work on right now that we know will have a positive impact and a high kind of preventative multiplier down the road.
Yeah, 100%. And this is going to be, I mean, I hate to say this is the way of the future because it should be the way of the present with the way our healthcare system is and the way our health generally is here in America. But really cool stuff. Again, DexaFit.com. Check them out. We'll post as much stuff as we can over to our Fitness Informative page. Here on YouTube, we'll post a link below. So, dude, appreciate it.
Yeah,
Thank
good
you.
to see you.